This video is brought to you in association with Fast and Loose, the Formula 1 post-show by AMP.
Lando Norris is one of the hottest properties in Formula 1. Yet his long-term future is firmly tied to McLaren, a team with an illustrious history and big ambitions, but that, in 2022, is struggling even to hang on to fourth in the Constructors' Championship. When the 22-year-old committed his future to McLaren, there was plenty of interest in his services, including from Red Bull, a team that has just re-emerged as F1's dominant force. On current form, every one of the big teams would look closely at signing Norris, who has excelled in F1's midfield for McLaren for the past 4 years. Norris signed his latest long-term big money deal with McLaren at the start of the year. That's before he had the chance to test, let alone race, the McLaren Mercedes MCL 36, which has proved to be something of a disappointment. So has Norris made a mistake? Should he have kept his options open for the long term so he could see how McLaren progressed? And does he regret locking himself into McLaren for the long term and out of a move to a team like Red Bull? Norris originally joined McLaren as part of its Young Driver programme in 2017, winning the European Formula 3 crown. He graduated successfully to Formula 2, finishing second in the championship, and was announced as a McLaren F1 driver for 2019 after his first 2 Friday practice outings at Spa and Monza. Red Bull attempted to recruit him to replace Brendan Hartley at Toro Rosso earlier in 2018. Hartley had endured a difficult start to the season, scoring just 1 point in the first 6 races, but overtures to bring in Norris, either on loan from McLaren or even signing him outright, led to nothing. But there was also interest in his services for 2019, given Norris would have been a free agent had McLaren not chosen to give him a race seat. Given McLaren was chasing Esteban Ocon and Carlos Sainz for a drive, Norris's promotion only became certain when Fernando Alonso decided to take a sabbatical from F1. Norris made a strong start to his F1 career, so after just 9 races, McLaren gave him a contract extension. He then signed what was described as a multi-year extension in May 2021 that would keep him at McLaren beyond 2022. But so strong was his performance level compared to Daniel Ricciardo, Norris was given a new megabucks contract in February 2022 to remain with the team until the end of 2025. At the time, he described this as a show of faith in McLaren, designed to ward off other teams. He also stressed that he knew there would be opportunities coming up with big teams in the future. This deal means Norris is part of an elite group of F1 drivers with such long-term contracts. Max Verstappen's deal runs to the end of 2028, for example, while Charles Leclerc is under contract to Ferrari until the end of 2024. Norris stands out amongst this group because he's locked in with a team that, unlike Red Bull and Ferrari, isn't a regular race winner or championship contender. At the time of the deal being signed, he confirmed there were talks with other big teams, and he recently said in an interview with German publication Auto, Motor and Sport that Red Bull was among them. But those Red Bull talks came before McLaren's difficult 2022 season got going, which might have given Norris reason to question the long-term commitment he made. McLaren has slipped from vying with Ferrari for third in the championship last season to falling just behind Alpine this year, both on points and performance. Norris has performed well and is best of the rest in the championship, behind the drivers from F1's big 3 teams. He's the only midfield driver to have passed the 100-point mark so far this year, but the gap to the top 6 shows how far behind McLaren is. Despite only claiming 1 podium finish this year, taking 3rd at Imola, Norris has continued to enhance his reputation by scoring points in 15 out of 19 races and outperforming teammate Daniel Ricciardo even more comprehensively than he did in 2021. Ricciardo has contributed only 29 points to McLaren's cause in 2022, meaning that Norris has had to shoulder the majority of the responsibility for spearheading the team's challenge. And despite repeatedly saying that the characteristics of the car don't suit his style either, he has extracted far more from a difficult car than Ricciardo has. By any standards, McLaren's season has been disappointing. But when the race asked Norris recently if McLaren's struggles have changed the way he views the long-term commitment he made, Norris insisted that it doesn't change anything, even though he admits to frustration when he does a good job but is still stuck in the midfield. Of course, Norris would say that, wouldn't he? But there is another dimension to this, because while he'd have hoped McLaren was a little more competitive this year, the expectations were always realistic. While 2021 rival Ferrari has emerged as a race-winning force, it was always going to take McLaren longer to get there, given it's still working its way out of a decade-long slump thanks to falling behind F1's top teams with its technology and facilities. McLaren has made major investments in its new state-of-the-art wind tunnel, which will come online next year, a cutting-edge driver-in-loop simulator, and in improving the turnaround speed of its production facilities. But these will all take time to pay off, and that is why Norris rules out the possibility of taking wins on merit, not just this year, but also next year, and is focused on 2024, when there will be no more excuses. As he describes it, until then, it's the patience game. Norris was aware that it would take McLaren time to emerge as a front-runner when he signed the deal, but he's right to focus on 2024 as the key year, as that will be the first car produced with the full benefit of McLaren's upgraded facilities. But given all of this expected improvement is hypothetical, cannot yet prove this will pay off, it is, as Norris says, an act of faith to commit his future to the team.
Check out Fast and Loose, the Formula One post-show on AMP, a new live radio app where anyone can host their own audio show. Tune in live immediately after every F1 race as hosts Mika Hakkinen, Arnett and Michelle Beadle are joined by a rotating list of insiders, commentators and drivers. Listen, drop comments in chat or call in to join the conversation. AMP is live radio reimagined. Download the AMP app by clicking the link below and follow at AMP Presents F1 so you never miss a show. Currently available in the US only.
None of what Norris says about McLaren's potential or the necessary timeline for the improvements to pay off is wrong. But would he have been better off keeping his options open rather than tying himself to McLaren for 2025? After all, lining up with sometime sim racing teammate Max Verstappen at Red Bull would give Norris a near guarantee of having race-winning machinery, albeit up against the toughest of teammates. There are several factors to consider, first of which is the timeline. When Norris signed this latest deal, he was under contract to McLaren until at least the end of 2023 already, which means the earliest he could have switched to Red Bull would have been 24. So it's not as if he turned down the chance to drive for Red Bull, say, next year. By ensuring he's still around at McLaren in 2024 when the team needs to take a big step forward, he's therefore going to be in the right place to benefit from the hard work he's put in since joining the team. Provided, of course, McLaren can overcome the one baked-in limitation it currently has, that it is a customer Mercedes team rather than a full works operation. Of course, he could have pushed Red Bull to finalise a deal for 2024 earlier this year, as it's not completely unheard of for drivers to sign contracts and options a long way out. But that would have meant he was no longer the focal point for McLaren for the long term. So unless there was a way to sign up for a more immediate move to Red Bull, his strategy makes sense. Where Norris's approach can be questioned is in his willingness to sign the new deal this year. Without that, he would have been a free agent for 2024 and have had the chance to see how McLaren progresses this year and next year, and what opportunities may arise with F1's other big teams. There's a strong case that this might have been the better move career-wise, as it would keep his options open. But then we have to consider more intangible elements. Firstly, the deal Norris signed at the start of this year was for a massive pay hike, reportedly taking it from in the region of $5 million a season to around $20 million. Given this new deal covers 4 years, that's a huge amount of money. Norris has also said that over and above the cash, the deal is about his enjoyment and happiness. He's very at home at McLaren, and the long-term stability means he's been able to focus on his driving without the distraction of thinking of moving elsewhere. But there's also the more mercenary reality that Norris won't talk about. He has a good idea of his own value as an F1 driver, which is high. If McLaren fails to deliver on its potential, there will be plenty of interest in his services from any top team that needs a driver. As with any F1 deal, there are various mechanisms in a contract that can lead to a parting of the ways if one side or the other doesn't deliver as promised. Norris is committed to McLaren and he is sincere in his confidence in the team, but it won't be until 2024, when McLaren doesn't need to be fighting for the championship but does need to be running close to the front, that we will really know if Norris was right to commit to McLaren for the long haul. If McLaren fulfills its potential, then Norris will be driving for a top team that will allow him to win races and fight for the championship. But if not, it would be naive to imagine Norris didn't consider the question of what happens if things go wrong when he signed the new deal. If McLaren does fall short in 2024, then in 2025 Norris will still be a 25-year-old with a long F1 future in front of him, and still likely be considered one of the best prospects on the grid. Teams like Red Bull would almost certainly show interest again, so he's hardly mortgaged his future, especially given the possibility that should exist for him to escape if McLaren underachieves. Had Norris turned down an immediate move to Red Bull to commit his long-term future to McLaren, it would have been a big mistake, but that wasn't on the table. But he's in a strong position whatever happens, as if his faith in McLaren isn't rewarded with performance, and that will be the ideal outcome for him, he will still be in a position to make a move to a team worthy of his abilities.
This video is brought to you in association with Fast and Loose, the Formula 1 post show by AMP.